Since the dawn of time, beyond the realm of human perception, there existed a conflict so profound that its echoes still shape the course of history. A battle that did not take place on Earth, nor was it fought with weapons made by human hands. This war, known as the War in Heaven, was not a mere skirmish between celestial beings. It was a defining moment, a division between light and darkness, obedience and rebellion, creation and destruction. To understand this war, we must step beyond the boundaries of our world and into the unseen, where beings of immense power and glory once stood side by side in perfect harmony. They were the host of heaven, the angels, divine creations designed to serve the Almighty with unwavering devotion. Among them was one unlike any other, an angel of extraordinary brilliance, wisdom, and beauty. His name was Lucifer, the morning star, the bearer of light. He stood among the highest of the heavenly host, adorned with splendor and entrusted with great authority. But something changed. A shadow fell over the celestial order. A single thought, a seed of pride, began to take root. The harmony that once defined the heavens trembled as the unthinkable unfolded. One of God's most magnificent creations turned against his creator. And he was not alone. Others followed, drawn to his vision, deceived by the promise of something more. The heavens were no longer a place of pure unity. A rift formed, dividing the angels into those who remained faithful and those who questioned their place. The very foundation of divine order was shaken, and what followed was a war unlike any other, a battle beyond time, beyond space, beyond human comprehension. But what was this war truly about? Was it a physical confrontation, where celestial swords clashed in the sky, or was it something far greater, a spiritual conflict, a rebellion of the will, a defiance of divine authority? And if this war took place in the distant past, why does it still matter today? The answers to these questions reveal more than just the history of the heavens. They reveal the nature of good and evil, the choices that define eternity, and the ongoing battle that still rages, not only in the spiritual realm, but in the hearts of humanity. For though the war in heaven was fought in the celestial realm, its consequences reached far beyond. It was not a battle that ended with a single event, nor was it confined to the past. It was the beginning of a struggle that would extend throughout time itself, shaping destinies, altering realities, and leaving a mark upon creation that would never fade. Before the rebellion, before the war, before the fall, there was only light. Among the celestial host, one being stood apart, a radiant figure of majesty and brilliance. His name was Lucifer, the morning star, a title that signified his unmatched glory among the angels. Created in perfection, he was a being of immense beauty and wisdom, a masterpiece of divine craftsmanship. To gaze upon him was to witness the very reflection of heaven's splendor. Lucifer's position among the angels was not ordinary. He was not merely one among many. He was exalted, anointed, and given authority that placed him near the very throne of God. The scriptures hint at his unparalleled status, describing him in language that conveys magnificence beyond earthly understanding. In the book of Ezekiel, a passage often associated with Lucifer's pre-fall existence speaks of a being who was adorned with every precious stone, a guardian of divine order, walking among the fiery stones of God's presence. Such descriptions paint a picture of one who was not only beautiful, but deeply favored, trusted with a role of great importance. Lucifer's wisdom was profound. He was not only radiant in appearance, but also in understanding. The depth of his knowledge surpassed that of any created being, making him a guiding light among the celestial hierarchy. His voice was like music, his presence commanding, his purpose clear. He was to lead, to glorify, to reflect the majesty of the Almighty. He stood among the cherubim, those who encircled the throne of God, guardians of his holiness. But with greatness came responsibility. Lucifer was not a god, nor was he equal to the Creator. He was given his gifts, entrusted with his beauty, granted his wisdom. He was meant to serve, to be a vessel through which divine glory was displayed. Every note of his existence was a song meant to be sung in worship, every movement a reflection of the one who made him. Yet, how fragile is the heart, even among the mightiest of beings. For all his splendor, Lucifer was still a creation, bound by the nature of free will. And within him, something began to change. A thought, a whisper, a question, one that should never have been entertained. It was not a flaw in his design, for God does not create imperfection. Rather, it was the choice of one who, in gazing upon his own radiance, began to see something more than what was intended. What could turn an angel of such brilliance against the very one who formed him? How could perfection become corrupted? These questions lead to the very heart of pride, the seed that would one day grow into full rebellion. But in the beginning, before the storm, before the war, there was only light. And in that light stood the brightest star, unaware that soon his own radiance would become his undoing. At first, it was nothing more than a thought, a fleeting question that should have vanished like mist before the rising sun. But instead of fading, it took root. Lucifer, the most magnificent of all the angels, began to see his own radiance, not as a reflection of God's glory, but as something independent, something that deserved recognition in its own right. Why should he serve when he was so exalted? Why should he bow when his beauty surpassed all others? He was not like the lesser angels, those who simply obeyed without question. He was wise, powerful, adorned in splendor beyond measure. Was it not fitting that he, too, should have a throne? Was it not right that he should be worshipped? Initially, these thoughts remained unspoken, concealed deep within his mind. But pride is never satisfied with silence. It craves recognition, seeking to be nurtured. What started as a mere whisper soon grew into a voice, one that did not remain confined to Lucifer's own heart, but began to echo among those around him. He was not alone in his thoughts. Among the heavenly host were many who admired him, who followed his lead, who saw in him a reflection of divine greatness. He was their guide, their inspiration, and now he became something more. He became their voice of reason, their questioner, their persuader. Have you ever wondered, he would ask, why we must always serve? Why we must always bow? Are we not glorious? Are we not powerful? Why should there be only one upon the throne? Why should we not also rule? The deception was subtle, wrapped in half-truths and gentle persuasion. Lucifer did not openly declare rebellion, not yet. He planted seeds, seeds of doubt, seeds of ambition, seeds of possibility. The idea that things could be different, that they should be different. At first, many recoiled. To question divine order was unthinkable, a thought too dangerous to entertain. But others listened. They listened because they too had felt it, the quiet longing for something more, the desire to rise beyond their place. Lucifer spoke not with force, but with elegance, with reason, with the same wisdom that had once been his greatest gift. He did not demand loyalty. He inspired it. He offered a vision, a promise, freedom from servitude, a kingdom where they would not be mere servants, but rulers. The whispers spread. What had once been a single voice became a murmur, then a current, then a movement. And yet, no battle had begun. No open defiance had been declared. This was not war, it was persuasion. It was the slow turning of hearts, the quiet unraveling of devotion. But heaven was not blind. The Almighty saw what was stirring. He beheld the change within his once faithful servant. And though he did not strike him down, Though he did not silence him, the moment was drawing near when choice would no longer be hidden in whispers. The heavens were still at peace, but beneath the surface, the foundations were beginning to crack. Soon every angel would be forced to decide, to remain in the light or to step into the growing shadow of rebellion. The whispers had grown into a movement, a current that flowed beneath the surface of heaven's perfect order. No longer was it a matter of private doubt or secret conversations. Something had shifted. Sides were forming. What began as subtle persuasion had now become a stark choice. Every angel in heaven was now confronted with a decision that would determine the course of eternity: remain faithful to God or follow Lucifer into the unknown. It was not an easy choice. For the angels, rebellion was unthinkable. At least it had been. Since the dawn of their creation, they had known only one reality, one truth: the sovereignty of God. They existed to serve, to glorify, to stand in the presence of the Almighty. To turn against him was to turn against the very fabric of existence. And yet, Lucifer's voice carried power. His words resonated, filling the minds of those who listened with visions of something different, something new. He spoke of freedom, of destiny, of power beyond what they had ever known. Why should we be bound to a single will? He asked. Why should we, who are strong and wise, submit when we could reign? Are we not divine? Do we not possess greatness? Why should we remain servants when we could be kings? The words were intoxicating, especially to those who had always longed for something greater. To the angels who had admired Lucifer, who had stood in awe of his beauty and wisdom, his vision was compelling. If anyone could lead them to something greater, it was him. If anyone was worthy to rule, was it not the brightest star of heaven? Yet others stood unmoved. The most powerful of these was Michael, the Archangel, whose loyalty was unshaken. He and those who stood with him saw through Lucifer's deception. They understood what was truly at stake. This was not a call to freedom. It was a rejection of truth, a defiance against the one who had given them life. And they would not waver. The division grew. Those who had once stood as brothers now eyed each other with doubt, with uncertainty. Some hesitated, torn between loyalty and the tantalizing promise of something more. Others had already chosen, their hearts hardened, their allegiance sealed. Heaven had never known conflict before. There had never been sides, never been opposition. But now, two camps had formed: those who remained steadfast in their devotion to God, and those who had been swayed by the promise of Lucifer's vision. The unity of heaven had been fractured, and there was no turning back. Lucifer had drawn a line. No more whispers, no more secrets. The time had come for action. And so, the great divide was complete. What had once been a realm of perfect harmony was now a kingdom on the brink of war. The silence that had once filled heaven was shattered. No longer was this a war of words, of whispers in the shadows. The division was complete, and now the unthinkable had begun, a battle in the very heart of God's kingdom. The rebellion had reached its breaking point, and there was no room left for debate or persuasion. The time for decision had passed. Now the heavens would tremble with the clash of celestial forces. On one side stood Lucifer and his followers, no longer merely angels but traitors to the divine order. What had once been beings of light now burned with something else, a defiant fire, a reckless ambition. Their hearts, once devoted to God, now pulsed with a hunger for dominion. They had chosen their path, and they would not turn back. Opposing them stood Michael, the warrior of heaven, leading the host of the Almighty. He was no mere messenger, no passive observer. He was a champion of divine justice, a commander whose loyalty to God was unshakable. The scripture proclaims, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. And the dragon fought and his angels. Revelation 12 verse 7. The heavens, once a place of perfect unity, had become a battlefield. But what kind of battle was this? It was not a war fought with earthly weapons. No swords of steel clashed. No arrows flew through the sky. This was a conflict beyond human comprehension, a war of power, of will, of unimaginable force. The very fabric of creation shook as angelic beings, mighty beyond measure, unleashed their strength upon one another. Light and darkness collided, and the impact echoed through the cosmos. The loyal angels fought not out of hatred, not out of a thirst for conquest, but for truth, for the order that had been broken. Michael stood at the forefront, his presence like a blazing fire, unyielding, unrelenting. His voice thundered as he called upon the power of the Almighty, leading the charge against the traitors. Lucifer, once the morning star, now stood in defiance, his brilliance twisted into something terrible. No longer a beacon of divine glory, he was now the leader of the rebellion, his wings spread wide, his eyes burning with fury. He was strong, stronger than any created being had ever been. But he was not stronger than the one who had made him. The battle raged, and for a time, it seemed as though the conflict had no end. The forces of light and darkness clashed with a fury that had never been seen before. But no rebellion against God could stand. No power, no force, no deception could overturn the will of the Almighty. And then the tide turned. The heavens themselves seemed to rise against the fallen ones. The power of God surged through his loyal warriors, and Lucifer, for all his strength, for all his cunning, began to fall back. His army, once so certain of victory, now wavered as the reality became undeniable. They could not win. The final blow was struck. The forces of rebellion, once so proud, were driven from their place in heaven. Lucifer, the brightest star, the morning star, was cast down. He and those who followed him were no longer welcome in the presence of God. They had chosen their path, and now they would face the consequence. Heaven was victorious. The war was won, but the story was far from over. For though Lucifer had been defeated, he had not been destroyed. His fall was only the beginning. The battle had reached its climax, and the heavens had spoken. Lucifer, once the brightest of all, now found himself on the edge of complete ruin. His rebellion had failed. His forces, though fierce and determined, had been no match for the might of the Almighty. The very power that once flowed through him as a servant of God had now turned against him as a force of judgment. And as the final blow was struck, the traitor and his followers were driven from their celestial home. The moment of his fall was unlike anything creation had ever witnessed. One instant, Lucifer stood in defiance, wings spread in proud rebellion. The next, he was cast down, stripped of his place, his honor, his glory. It was not merely a descent, it was an expulsion, a violent tearing away from the divine presence. Like a star ripped from the heavens, he fell, plunging into the unknown, his cries of rage and despair echoing through the void. The scriptures capture the magnitude of this fall. How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. Isaiah 14 verse 12. No longer the bearer of light, no longer the morning star, Lucifer had lost everything. His name, once spoken with reverence, now carried the weight of condemnation. He was no longer a prince among the angels. He was an outcast, a fallen one. But where did he fall? Was it to earth, to some abyss beyond the reach of mortal sight, or to a place of punishment designed for the rebellious? The Bible speaks of a realm prepared for him and his followers, a place of darkness, a prison for the fallen. For if God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment. 2 Peter 2 verse 4. Yet the fallen ones were not bound entirely. Their exile was not the end of their influence. Lucifer's defeat in heaven was not the end of his war. It was merely the beginning of a new strategy. For though he had been cast down, though his power had been shattered, his hatred remained. He could no longer strike at heaven, but there was another battlefield, a place where he could still spread his deception, still wage war against the Almighty in a different way. And that place was earth. It was here, among God's newest creation, humanity, that Lucifer would seek his revenge. If he could not rule in heaven, then he would corrupt what God loved most. He would twist the hearts of men and women, ensnare them in the same deception that had led to his own fall. If he could not sit upon the throne of heaven, then he would make war against the children of God, turning them away from their Creator. The fall of Lucifer was not his alone. With him fell a host of angels, once glorious beings who had stood in the presence of God, now exiled into darkness. They had chosen their path, bound themselves to the deception of the morning star, and now they shared his fate. No longer did they belong to the kingdom of light. No longer did they sing before the throne. Their rebellion had cost them everything, and what awaited them was an existence far different from what they had known. Some of these fallen ones were cast into a prison, bound in chains, awaiting their final judgment. The scriptures speak of these beings, revealing that they were not merely left to wander freely. And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their proper dwelling, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. Jude 1 verse 6. Their crime had not gone unanswered. They had crossed a line that could not be undone, and their punishment was severe. But not all were bound. Some still roamed, their presence an unseen force in the world of men. Though exiled from heaven, they were not without influence. Their hatred for God had not diminished, nor had their desire to corrupt. No longer able to challenge heaven directly, they turned their attention to the earth, seeking to twist and manipulate the creation God had so lovingly formed. These spirits moved among humanity, whispering lies, stirring division, and leading many into darkness. The influence of the fallen was not always hidden. In the ancient world, there are accounts of beings who walked among men, entities who sought to claim dominion over the earth in ways that defied the natural order. The book of Genesis speaks of a time when the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Genesis 6 verse 2. This mysterious passage has long been debated, but many believe it refers to fallen angels who took human women, giving rise to a race known as the Nephilim, giants, beings of great strength and renown. These offspring, unnatural in their very existence, became symbols of corruption, a manifestation of the defiance that began in heaven. Their presence was an abomination, and God, in his justice, would not allow such wickedness to continue unchecked. It is believed that the great flood of Noah's time was, in part, a judgment upon this corruption, a cleansing of the earth from the evil that had spread through the influence of these fallen ones. Yet, even after the flood, the fallen continued their work. Though they had lost their place in heaven, they remained a force in the world, their rebellion unfinished. They became the principalities and powers that warred against the souls of men, the deceivers who led nations astray. They lurked in the shadows, influencing rulers, distorting truth, and leading many into idolatry and destruction. Lucifer, now known as Satan, had not given up his war. Though he had lost heaven, he had gained something else, a battlefield where he could continue his defiance. And his fallen brethren, the exiled angels, became his army, his messengers of deceit, his instruments in a war that was far from over. The fate of these angels was sealed. Judgment would come. Their rebellion would not last forever. But until that day, they remained, watching, scheming, waiting for every opportunity to strike against the children of God. The war in heaven had ended, but the war on earth had just begun. Lucifer had lost his place in heaven, but he had not lost his ambition. His exile was not an end, but a beginning, one that would unfold on a new battlefield. No longer able to challenge God directly, he turned his attention to the ones made in God's image, humanity. If he could not overthrow the Almighty, he would corrupt his creation. If he could not sit upon the throne of heaven, he would establish his dominion elsewhere. And so, the war that had begun in the celestial realm now spread to the earth, with mankind caught in the middle. The first strike came in the garden. There, in a world untouched by sin, Lucifer, now Satan, the adversary, approached the first humans not as a conqueror, but as a deceiver. He did not come in power, but in subtlety. The same cunning that had turned a third of the angels against their Creator was now used against those who had never known rebellion. Did God really say? Genesis 3, verse 1. With a single question, the seeds of doubt were planted, just as they had been among the angels who followed him. He did not force, did not demand. He whispered. He suggested another way, just as he once had in heaven. And when Eve and Adam listened, when they chose to step outside of divine command, the war had officially reached its new front. Sin entered the world, and with it, the dominion of darkness began to take root. But Satan's victory was not complete. Though mankind had fallen, God had not abandoned them. A promise was made, a prophecy given, that one day the offspring of the woman would crush the serpent's head. From that moment, the war intensified. Satan and his fallen ones moved through history, corrupting, deceiving, working to ensure that promise would never be fulfilled. The fallen angels did not disappear. They became the principalities and powers that sought to rule the nations. They inspired idolatry, false religions, and practices that led humanity away from the truth. They masqueraded as gods, drawing worship unto themselves, twisting the hearts and minds of men. From ancient civilizations to modern societies, their influence remained, shaping cultures, manipulating rulers, and waging a war not of swords and armies, but of deception and spiritual bondage. Temptation became their greatest weapon. Just as Lucifer had fallen through pride, so too did they use pride to lead others astray. They whispered lies of self-exaltation, of power, of freedom apart from God. They offered knowledge, pleasures, and illusions of control, anything to keep mankind from turning back to their Creator. But they were not without opposition. Throughout history, God raised up those who stood against the darkness. Prophets, kings, and ultimately, the Messiah himself. When Christ came, Satan knew his greatest challenge had arrived. In the wilderness, he attempted to tempt him, just as he had done with Adam. But where the first man fell, the Son of Man stood firm. The war had reached its most decisive moment. The cross was the great turning point. What seemed to be Satan's victory, putting the Son of God to death, was, in fact, his greatest defeat. Having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. Colossians 2 verse 15. The power of sin and death had been broken. The gates of the kingdom had been thrown open, and a way of salvation had been made. Yet, the war did not end. Though the outcome had been decided, Satan and his fallen host still fight. They are wounded, desperate, knowing that their time is short. Their methods remain the same: deception, division, temptation, and fear. They seek to blind the minds of the unbelieving, to keep them from the truth. They war against those who follow Christ, attempting to weaken faith, to sow doubt, to disrupt the work of God's kingdom. This is the battle we live in now. Though Satan has been defeated in heaven and his doom is sealed, he rages on, seeking to take as many with him as he can. The war did not end when he was cast out, it merely changed its form. And every soul, knowingly or not, is part of this conflict. The question remains, on which side do we stand? The war that began in heaven did not remain in the distant past, nor is it confined to history. It is not a myth, nor is it a story with an ending already played out. It continues even now, unseen but ever present, moving through the lives of individuals, the struggles of nations, and the hidden places of the human heart. Though the battlefield is no longer among the stars, the conflict rages on, woven into the very fabric of daily life. Many walk through the world unaware of this war, believing that what they see is all there is. But Scripture makes it clear, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Ephesians 6 verse 12. There is more at work than meets the eye. The unseen battlefield is all around us, and whether people acknowledge it or not, they are caught in its midst. Evil does not always reveal itself in dramatic displays. It does not always come in the form of demonic apparitions or overt supernatural manifestations. More often, it works subtly, through temptation, deception, fear, and distraction. It twists truth, it distorts reality, it numbs the conscience. It moves through ideologies, through entertainment, through the whisper of doubt that makes one question what is right and wrong. It wears many disguises, some appealing, some ordinary, but all with the same purpose, to pull people away from God. But this war is not fought alone. No one who stands with God is left defenseless. For those who belong to Him, there is a calling, not to hide, not to surrender, but to stand. Put on the full armor of God, so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. Ephesians 6 verse 11. This is not merely a metaphor. It is a command to be prepared, to be aware, to recognize the battle that rages beyond the visible world. The weapons of this war are not made of steel or fire, but they are stronger than any earthly force. Faith is a shield, protecting against the doubts and lies that seek to weaken resolve. Truth is a belt, holding everything together, ensuring that one is not led astray. Righteousness is a breastplate, guarding the heart against corruption. The Word of God is a sword, sharp enough to cut through deception, to expose falsehood, to bring clarity in a world clouded by confusion. But above all, prayer is the lifeline. It is the connection to the true commander, the source of strength, wisdom, and victory. Through prayer, the forces of darkness are pushed back. Through prayer, faith is strengthened. Through prayer, the unseen battle is fought not with human effort, but with divine power. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. James 5 verse 16. The war affects everyone, but it does not have to consume them. Those who walk in the light do not need to fear the darkness. They are called to be vigilant, to be strong, to stand firm. The battle is real, but so is the victory for those who choose to fight on the side of truth. The unseen battlefield is not one of despair, but of purpose. It is a war already won in Christ, yet still fought daily in the hearts and minds of men. And in this war, every choice matters, every action carries weight, and every soul has the power to stand against the darkness. The war that began in heaven will one day reach its final hour. Though the battle has continued throughout history, moving from the celestial realm to the earth, from the hearts of angels to the hearts of men, it has always been moving toward one inevitable moment, the final confrontation between good and evil, the last clash between light and darkness. The Bible speaks of this event in vivid detail, revealing that a day is coming when Satan, his fallen host, and all who stand with him will face their ultimate defeat. Revelation paints the picture of this final battle, a moment when the forces of darkness gather for one last attempt to overthrow the authority of God. The nations of the world, deceived by Satan, will rise in rebellion, seeking to challenge the very throne of heaven. They marched across the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of God's people, the city he loves. But fire came down from heaven and devoured them. Revelation 20 verse 9. Though they will stand in defiance, their rebellion will be brief. No force, no army, no deception will stand against the power of the Almighty. At the center of this battle stands Christ, the victorious King, the one who was foretold from the beginning. He does not come as a suffering servant, but as a warrior, leading the hosts of heaven. Then I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. The one sitting on it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. Revelation 19 verse 11. He comes not to debate, not to negotiate, but to bring an end to the dominion of evil. The angels who once fought in the war of heaven will fight again, but this time there will be no uncertainty, no prolonged battle. Michael and the armies of heaven will stand against Satan and his forces, but unlike the first rebellion, this war will not end with an exile. It will end with final destruction. Satan, who once roamed freely after his fall, who once corrupted and deceived, will no longer have anywhere to flee. And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet had been thrown. They will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Revelation 20 verse 10. His power will be broken, his reign ended, his presence removed forever. And then the world itself will be restored. No longer will creation groan under the weight of sin. No longer will humanity be caught in the struggle between good and evil. The war will be over, and a new beginning will come. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Revelation 21 verse 1. The universe will be cleansed, renewed, made as it was always meant to be. This is the end of the war, not in ruin, not in despair, but in victory. The rebellion that began with a single whisper of pride, that grew into a battle among angels, that spread to the hearts of men, will finally be silenced. Lucifer, once the brightest star, will be no more. The darkness will vanish, and only light will remain. And in that restored creation, those who stood with God, who fought the good fight, who endured in faith, will stand in glory. No longer will they know pain or sorrow, for God himself will dwell with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Revelation 21 verse 4. The final battle will not simply end a war. It will begin in eternity where peace reigns, where righteousness flourishes, where God's kingdom stands unchallenged forever. And in that new world, there will be no memory of rebellion, no shadow of what was lost, only the fullness of what was always meant to be. The war that once raged across heaven and earth is over. The rebellion that began with a whisper of pride, that spread to the hearts of angels and men, that shaped the course of history and brought suffering and darkness into the world, has finally been silenced. No longer does evil have a place in creation. No longer do shadows linger at the edges of existence. The old order, where sin and death held sway, has passed away. And in its place, something new has begun. This is not merely an ending. It is a restoration, a return to what was always meant to be. From the beginning, God's plan was not destruction, but renewal. He did not create the world for corruption, nor did he form mankind for suffering. The war was never about annihilation. It was about redemption. And now that redemption is complete, heaven and earth are no longer separate. The barrier that once divided the divine from the mortal is gone, and the dwelling place of God is once again among his creation. Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. Revelation 21 verse 3. No longer will there be distance. No longer will there be longing. The separation caused by sin is erased, and the harmony that was lost in Eden is restored. A world without evil, without pain, without sorrow. This is the promise fulfilled. The suffering that once plagued humanity, the wounds inflicted by war, by betrayal, by loss, are no more. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Revelation 21 verse 4. The scars of history will not remain. The weight of the past will not linger. Only joy, only peace, only the fullness of life in the presence of the Almighty. The fallen ones, those who defied their Creator, are no more. Lucifer, who sought to rise above the throne of God, who waged war against heaven, who spread darkness across the world, is gone. His name is forgotten, his presence erased. He has no kingdom, no influence, no voice. The deceiver has been silenced forever, and with him, all the powers that once opposed the light. And in their place there is glory, a new heaven, a new earth, a world not stained by sin, not touched by rebellion, but filled with the radiance of God's eternal reign. There is no need for sun or moon, for his presence is the light. There is no temple, for his presence fills all things. There is no fear, no danger, no night, only the eternal day of his kingdom. Those who have stood firm in faith, who have endured through trials, who have held to the promise despite the darkness, now inherit what was always prepared for them. They are no longer warriors in a battle, no longer pilgrims in a broken world. They are sons and daughters dwelling in the house of their Father, reigning with him in love and righteousness. This is the true victory, not just the defeat of evil, but the fulfillment of everything good, the restoration of all that was lost, the completion of the divine plan that was set in motion before time began. The war in heaven was never just about the fall of Lucifer. It was never only about conflict and judgment. It was about something far greater, the triumph of light, the vindication of truth, the unshakable power of love that never abandoned its creation. And now that love reigns forever, the war is over, the kingdom is here, and this, at last, is the beginning of eternity. If this video has inspired you, if you've gained insight into the great spiritual conflict that shapes our world, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more content like this. Like the video to support the message, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. What stood out to you the most? What questions do you have? Let's continue the conversation. And most importantly, share this video with your friends, family, and loved ones. This is a story that everyone needs to hear. The more we understand the unseen battle around us, the more we can stand firm in truth and faith. Thank you for watching. Stay strong, stay faithful, and remember, the victory belongs to the light.